Welcome to today's webinar entitled Why Volatility Can Put Colleges and Universities on the Path to Net Zero. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager of Special Programs for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage later this week. Please visit our website at www.apa.org to register for upcoming events and to view archived webinars for continuing education credits found under the Continuous Learning tab. APA Academy and Institute are back and coming to Fort Worth, Texas in early January 2023. Information is available on APA website under the CL tab. Professional continuing education certificates are available for today's program. AIA members who need their attendance reported to AIA should contact me at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, at APA.org. Those who indicated they wanted a certificate at registration and meet the requirements will receive certificates in the next couple of days. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. If you're in call-only mode, please make sure to send an email to me at billie@apa.org so I can send you a certificate if you would like one. The system only recognizes you if you log in. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Ori Cummings. Ori, take it away.
Thank you very much, Billie. Really appreciate it, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm really excited to talk through some of these slides with you today, and hopefully get some good feedback. We do have some polling questions, so really excited to get some information back from you on some of the questions that we're seeing come up quite a bit within your world as we're working in it quite a bit. But the webinar today is called Why Volatility Can Put Colleges and Universities on the Path to Net Zero. So obviously we're seeing a lot of volatility around us, and this is caused by a lot of different external factors, and it touches on a lot of different aspects of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So volatility can mean a lot of things to different people. So hopefully we'll touch on some that kind of hits home with the attendees on this call today, and happy to go through some ways we can maybe take advantage of that versus looking at it as something that causes us to pause, which typically when there's a lot of uncertainty going on around us, it's natural to kind of freeze up a little bit and want to wait and see what's going to happen before we really make a decision or take action. And the goal today is to maybe look at it in this environment that we're currently in as an opportunity versus something that causes more risk. So just like I mentioned, a few things I want to touch on today, talk a little bit about that volatility and how we can maybe take advantage of it and kind of pursuing our pathway to net zero. We're all facing different challenges throughout colleges and universities throughout the country, but a lot of you are facing similar challenges. So there's an opportunity to, kind of look at some things that have been successful for other like colleges or universities throughout the country, whether they're public or private, and we want to kind of talk and touch through on some of those things. The challenges of implementing capital projects. So obviously, if there's no capital there, it makes it very difficult to do some of these things. So we want to talk a little bit more about that and kind of the current procurement process that you're kind of going through, and maybe what other alternatives are, and some of the challenges and maybe solutions to implementing a different type of procurement pathway. And then obviously when we're looking at things that save money, the longer we wait to do them, the less opportunity we have to save money, and that's kind of a lost opportunity. So we want to talk about how we can maybe look at projects as a way to not necessarily delay them, because the cost of waiting in that situation can be more concerning than if we had just moved forward with the project right away. So I want to just touch on Centrica Business Solutions. So, why are we here talking about this? Centrica is part of a 200-year-old utility company. So we've been around for a really long time, and actually kind of started 200 years ago. We were lighting the gas lanterns in the streets of London. So that just kind of takes you back and says, all right, a lot's changed in 200 years, and Centrica has been able to keep up with those technologies, keep up with that change, and stay ahead of it. So we've been able to help our customers implement projects that help them with their goals, help incorporate new technologies, and do it in a low risk way. Because there's obviously a lot of cool things out there. There's a lot of technologies, and some of them sound great, but do they work? We want to look at opportunities to implement projects that will work, that will be successful, and will give you the performance that you're expecting. And that's something that we want to make sure is not a risk. So this slide kind of shows you a number of things that we typically will incorporate in a project with our customers. And these are probably a lot of things that you're already looking at, you've already done, or you have maybe a plan or want or need or a master plan around trying to do. So there's a lot of different points in the process that we like to get engaged with our customers and with colleges and universities. And these are some of the things that we want to try to help them with, identify, plan for, and make sure it's done in a cost-effective manner and in a low-risk manner. So again, we talk about volatility. So like I mentioned, volatility can be across a lot of different things. And I think with where we are today, we're seeing a lot of volatility, and a lot of that can be attributed to COVID, but that's where we're at, and we're trying to move forward and make sure that we're addressing some of these things. So obviously across campuses, across countries, one of the major ups and downs that we're seeing is with enrollment. So obviously that's really important to a college or university. That's a big component to where the funds come from to complete your projects. So we want to look at enrollment volatility and see how we can maybe help with that. And some projects kind of look at them in a holistic way versus just as an energy savings project. How can this project make your campus more attractive to new students? Utility costs, obviously, with everything that's going on, we're seeing utility costs drastically increase at much higher escalation than we've seen in the past. So although this is not great for your current budget, it does create an opportunity to create savings and address these moving forward. Different parts of the country experience different weather anomalies or weather situations. So California, for example, rolling brownouts. There's different things that happen throughout the country that are kind of impacting us differently. And so by looking at those risky changes that are really uncontrollable to us, how can we set your campus up to be more resilient to those type of events? Obviously, political legislation, especially with public universities, this is huge, and every state's different, and being able to stay on top of the opportunity that's created by some of these legislative changes, the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed by Congress, that's obviously that's an opportunity to incorporate some tax credits that maybe weren't available to a lot of you previously. And there's a lot of things within those changes that happen that are kind of hard to grasp initially. And even the IRS and other folks that signed on the dotted line for this to pass don't understand it completely. And that's something that we're working with people to make sure that we understand every aspect of it and how universities and colleges can take advantage of some of those changes. And then kind of the big thing is it's deferred maintenance. So this obviously we've seen a drastic uptick in deferred maintenance across colleges, and universities throughout the country over the past few years. And that, obviously a lot of schools weren't able to complete projects and address some of these maintenance issues during COVID because of, the capital constraints. So that has, made a huge uptick in, just talking to some universities. Recently, we've heard numbers as high as $2 billion in deferred maintenance, and that seems daunting. That's really, tough to look at. So that's something we want to talk a little bit more about, how we can help address that without, having to eat up all of the capital budget.
Okay, we're going to start with some polls. If you are in full mode, please come out of full screen so you can participate in the poll is now open. Our poll question is, what sustainability measures would you like to accomplish? Select all that apply: boiler upgrade, water conservation, or efficient HVAC and building automation systems, solar, LEDs. I will now close the poll and sharing the results. Boiler upgrade 41%, water conservation 36%, efficient HVAC and building automation 86%, solar 42%, LEDs 47%. Corey, back to you.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it. All right. Those results are, it kind of touches on everything. And that's kind of where we're at, in this state of, trying to get these deferred maintenance issues addressed, as well as trying to address sustainability. So, and we don't need to look at sustainability and net zero efforts as separate efforts from our deferred maintenance. Those can be addressed at the same time and allow us to accomplish a lot of things. And a lot of those measures that were listed on that polling question, I think would help a lot of us get to where we need to be on both sides of things. And so this slide just kind of gives you some statistics and some numbers, because I think it's helpful to put numbers to it. I mentioned some of the universities we've talked to have up to $2 billion in deferred maintenance. The collective, from the data that we have, the collective across the country is $112 billion. So that's a large number, and especially when you're talking about HVAC equipment and things that are necessary for the function of your facilities, and especially resident halls and places where students are there 24 hours a day through different parts of our country where we have very high heat, high humidity areas, and we have very cold areas in the northern part of the country. So these are critically important to not only the function of our facilities, but the comfort of our facilities. And that kind of goes back to making sure that we're creating a campus environment that's comfortable for students. Another challenge that 75% of colleges and universities, their campus facilities are between 30 and 40 years old. And I would say that is probably on the low end. From some of you, you're probably like, oh man, I've got, most of my buildings are 100 years old, and that's the challenge I have to deal with. So across the board, we have some older historic campuses throughout the country, and it's the older those facilities get, the more challenging it can be. But with that said, there's lots of challenges in new facilities too, and some of those things can be addressed as part of kind of an overall project that focuses on sustainability as well as deferred maintenance. And one thing that we're seeing a lot of, and I was actually talking to University of Chicago about this recently, the number one factor for their students in making an enrollment decision was sustainability, and what's the college or university doing for sustainability. And so I don't see that at number one on most colleges and universities, but I thought that was really interesting to learn that, because we are seeing it become increasingly more important to the students. It's no longer not important or their fifth most important thing. It's continuing to move up that list. And so that's something, from an enrollment perspective that we really need to be, addressing. So again, we talk about all the cool things that we can do, to help with sustainability. And I know a lot of you are putting together plans, and your master plan or sustainability plan or carbon reduction plan is putting you in a good spot from a planning perspective. But how do we go about actually procuring that project? So there's a lot of challenges around procurement in public and private universities and colleges. Both have some unique challenges, but a lot of similar challenges. And some of the big things are, just budget alone. So if we're looking to use the budget that we're provided to complete these projects, there's always going to be a lot of things we can't fit. So then you're kind of in that position where you're prioritizing things, stuff that it is important to you, it's important to your facilities, but it's just not quite as important as maybe paving a parking lot or replacing a roof. Those are things that it makes it very difficult to complete some projects because they kind of continue to fall down that priority list. And that's a big problem that a lot of us see. ROI requirements, so return on investment requirements. Usually that's kind of, all right, let's go get the things done that have the lowest, quickest payback on them so that we can justify it from either an internal rate of return standpoint or just from an investment that you're using with your capital budget. So although ROI requirements are a great way to maybe take a look at things and weigh them against each other, it does create challenges because a lot of things like the boiler replacements and the chiller replacements and cooling towers, they're just not going to fall into any of our ROI requirements. So, and those things are as critical as anything on a college campus to make sure that we're addressing. So when we look at things from just a strictly ROI, it makes it very difficult for us to accomplish the projects that really need to get accomplished. One thing that we see is the savings benefits. So obviously when we're completing energy efficiency projects or water efficiency projects, there's a savings component to it. Where does that savings go? That's a challenge because you're going through and implementing a project, and then the savings that comes from that project doesn't always come back to you for you to use elsewhere across your campus. So that's a challenge. And we want to make sure that you're putting the effort in to do these things and save the college or university money. We want to make sure that we're helping you capture that and using it on other things that you need to get done that help you address some of that deferred maintenance. And then obviously from a staffing perspective, there's a lot that needs to be done from a maintenance standpoint and a day-to-day operating of central plants and just addressing the calls that you get from comfort, standpoint or leaky windows or whatever else might come up. Having the right staff to be able to implement these projects in a timely manner, or even go through the process of designing and developing and procuring the project, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time commitment. So that can be a real challenge for a lot of us. So this is kind of your traditional approach that we see from a procurement perspective. So obviously a lot of the performance accountability falls onto you. So especially when we're looking at projects from a savings perspective, the project's going to save us X amount per year for the next 15 years, the life of the lighting equipment or whatever it might be. The person or the group that's accountable for that is you and your team versus so if 3 years in, if it's not performing the way that we expected it, how is that getting addressed? And typically in that situation, it's just we're not getting as much savings as we were hoping, and that can be a problem, obviously. So by putting all of that risk on, onto the college or university, it puts us in a tough position when we're implementing projects. So we want to kind of maybe take a different look at a different process. And one of the things that we're seeing, and this isn't just something that we're seeing in a couple different areas of the country. We're getting very consistent messages from a lot of colleges and universities throughout the entire country, and have seen several successful projects move forward by looking at things a little bit differently and leveraging what we call a sustainable energy as a service. So a lot of you maybe have heard of energy as a service, or efficiency as a service, or lighting as a service. So there's a lot of as a service type platforms out there. The general idea is that we want to basically create a partnership. So you guys would, instead of trying to do everything and taking all the risk on and having to provide all the capital, this is a way to allow for projects to get done quicker, more efficiently, no out-of-pocket costs, and also low risk. And that's really what we want to look at is, well, let's not just look at the immediate benefits, let's look at the long-term benefits of the project. So by utilizing this approach, like I said, there's a lot of successful case studies that we've seen around this. It allows for keeping the funding of the project to be off balance, so you're not taking on debt. There's opportunity to offload that risk onto the ESCO contractor, or the energy services contractor. And so it's a great way to implement projects quickly, efficiently, and be able to tackle a lot more, because a lot of those procurement challenges that we talked about a few slides ago are now being addressed, and it's no longer a challenge. And this just kind of gives you that cash flow model of how this works, just kind of in its simplest form. So typically you're paying a certain amount is allocated in your budget for utility expenses, operation and maintenance expenses. So that's that first block there, the before contract. Once you enter into a sustainable energy services agreement, during the contract period, you're basically saying, all right, we've just accomplished all this work. We've got our chillers replaced. We've got all our lighting done. Our building automation's been updated to the front end platform that we want it to be. And there's going to be resulted savings from that. That's, a portion of that savings will address the basically the term payments that are part of the project. So, it's kind of a look at it like there's some savings. You guys are sharing some of that savings to address some of your projects. And then after the contract, you basically get all of the savings of the project. And although the savings is important, because that's creating, a positive cash flow for the university and college, the biggest benefit from these projects that we see is, again, that deferred maintenance of getting the projects done that you need to get done, as well as incorporating potentially renewables, EV charging, and other things that you want to do around your campus to start moving towards that net zero goal that you have. And here is the next polling question.
Okay, our next poll question is, what is your approach to energy management? And your options are tackling one project at a time, building solutions, or other. The poll is now open. I will now close the poll. And the results are tackling one project at a time, 39%, building solutions, 44%, other, 16%.
All right, thanks, Billy. I think that kind of shows us. I'd be interested to see what some of the others are, but there definitely is a mixed approach, and one of the things that we want to look at is how can we best approach these projects to get the most benefit out of them, and that's really that starts with putting together a pathway and actually implementing that pathway, and this could be a roadmap. A lot of master plans or sustainability plans might lay some of this stuff out at a high level, but how do we actually go through and make sure we're addressing these projects in the best way financially for the college or university? So one way we see that, and this is kind of that bundling solutions option, it's basically, let's combine technologies. Let's not look at everything as standalone technology. We have to do this first because it's the quickest payback or it's the least expensive option. Let's see how we can take the advantages from doing a lighting project and increase the ability to do more with that. And so this bar chart kind of just shows the cost, which is the orange, versus the lifetime savings from the project. So if you're doing just a boiler only project, obviously the cost typically outweighs the lifetime savings. And we see different paybacks on different boilers, and it really just depends on the solution and your existing situation, but typically it's not going to pay for itself within its lifetime. So when you go back to the ROI requirements that we might have for these types of projects, makes it very difficult to justify it. So it becomes more of just a deferred maintenance capital expense and not necessarily an efficiency or energy savings project. And then the second option shows lighting. So this is what you would expect from a lighting project. The savings most every time will outweigh the cost over the life of, unless there's a lower cost, cheaper solution being implemented, and there's maintenance issues with it that didn't quite work out. Typically, we'll see that an LED project will pay for itself within its useful life. So then that third bar chart there kind of shows, all right, this is what happens when we combine those technologies. The boiler project with the lighting now pays for itself within its useful life, and that's kind of how we want to look at things, is look at them together versus separately, and that's how we've seen projects most effectively get implemented. So another piece to that is this curve. So I know this is a crazy curve, there's a bunch of colors, but really what this is showing is, you can kind of see where it says on the first chart, it says excess solar is wasted. So essentially what we're saying here is, let's implement technologies and deploy them in the right order. We really want to do solar. There's a lot of opportunity to make a big impact on our campus with solar, but have we done the reduction within our facilities that should be done prior to doing that? And then the risk there essentially is, if the production with solar happens after the reduction with lighting, building automation, other things that affect the internal usage in your buildings, there's risks that you overproduce once you've done those projects. So if you're doing solar after a lighting project, there's a chance that you could have made your solar array smaller and gotten the same results from it. So that's what we're really trying to do, is optimize the approach, optimize how we're implementing and deploying these measures to make sure that it is giving you the most benefit, and not looking at everything kind of in a vacuum. So this just kind of talks about that a little bit more. So how do we optimize that pathway and what it looks like? So like I mentioned, when it comes to solar, a lot of times you'll hear reduce your energy, produce new energy, and then store it. So that's kind of a pathway that we can look at when we're talking about solar and battery storage. This kind of looks at the bigger picture when we're looking at a lot of different opportunities. So step one is obviously planning. We want to put a plan together, and you know, a lot of you might already have a plan together, might be in the process of doing that, or just, you know, getting started and trying to figure out where to start. But once you have that roadmap developed, then you can start with step one, which is just that reduction that I talked about. So we want to reduce what's happening inside the building's walls, and get that, because that's going to be the most cost-effective way to get some initial impact. And then beyond that, it's step two is convert. So we want to start looking at solar and maybe ways to store that solar so we can get the most value out of it. Or if there's other ways to, you know, with geothermal or other ways to maybe provide heating and cooling within our facilities, those are things we want to look at. And then look at the vehicle conversion of looking at other alternative fuel sources from the typical with your fleet vehicles. And then finally, the step three is really, let's, you know, where can we go from here? Let's enhance, you know, the quality of our, you know, utilities throughout campus, the quality of our energy, and it's really optimizing what we've had in place and trying to get those technologies to work best together to maximize, whether it's utility incentives or federal tax credits. However we can do that, we want to, you know, try to incorporate those into the roadmap. Next poll question.
Okay, our next poll question is, do you have improvement projects to reduce your energy and operating costs that are at high risk of not being approved? Your selections are yes or no. I will now close the poll. And your answers were yes, 78%, no, 22%.
All right, thank you, Billy. So that's, yeah, that's good. That's interesting to hear. You know, I think that most schools have some sort of project that they need to get completed, and they want to implement, but they, you know, go through the budget approval process and just, you know, aren't able to get that in, and maybe it falls into next year and it ends up moving forward eventually. But that's kind of, you know, what we want to talk about a little bit more on, is when we delay projects, there is a cost of waiting, and that's something that may be completely out of our control, maybe because of priorities and how things get prioritized by, you know, who's approving the budgets. But that's a challenge that I think a lot of us either are experiencing or have experienced and maybe found a way to address it. But that is definitely a big part of what we want to talk about to kind of close things out today. So this, the cost of delaying projects, and this is another, you know, line graph that kind of shows some jagged numbers here, but what it really is showing is the green is if you were to take a sustainable energy as a service approach, that's what that green is. So you're basically staying above zero, as in positive cash flow from day one. No cash has been outlaid from your budget. You've addressed a lot of your deferred maintenance issues. You've created some savings. You've taken steps forward in your sustainability efforts. And then, you know, towards the end of the term of whatever that agreement was set up for, it starts to shoot up, and that's where you really start to see some long-term benefit and value from the project. In the meantime, the typical approach with a cash deal is kind of your orange line, where over time you're outlaying expenses, and you're tackling maybe 20% of your projects in year one with some capital that's available, and then the next year you're doing another grouping of projects, and that's kind of why it kind of jags. So every time it juts out, that's another cash outlay that you're having to put forward from your budget. And so by not getting all of that work done at once in year one, you've now delayed the savings opportunity that could have come from that. And typically by the time you're complete through that, you have to almost start over because some of the technology has kind of reached its end of useful life. So what this really is showing is, one of the challenges that we see to moving forward with a sustainable energy as a service project is the cost of capital. So, we tend to want to look at that component. What's this thing going to cost over time? How much savings am I sacrificing as part of this project to make sure I can do it through this, through this mechanism? And that's one of the things that makes it very difficult for sometimes for us to see. But what this shows, and this can be shown on a project by project basis that's custom to your project, is this shows that although there is a cost of capital associated with that funding path, it actually still costs you less than it would cost to push your projects out over a 5-year period and using capital. So there's a long-term benefit there that we wanted to highlight here. And the example that it mentions is it's a $2.7 million project, which that would typically be your upfront cost, but instead this project's paid for completely. And a project like that could include campus-wide lighting, water conservation throughout all the resident halls, a chiller replacement, rooftop unit replacements. So there's a lot of things that could be incorporated into that may be causing some headaches, and part of the deferred maintenance that you're experiencing. And this is a way to really address that. So all in all, really what we wanted to talk through was this is one of many ways that projects can be funded. Grants are available, incentives from utilities are available, and all these things can be brought into a project. But ultimately, what we want to try to touch on is that you're not alone. You're not in this alone. You don't have to be in this alone. There's opportunity to partner with someone that can help with this, and they can help you do more of what you're trying to do, because every one of you is trying to do the right thing, and you're doing a lot of the right things, and this is just a way to maybe increase your ability to do more and tackle more and make a larger impact. And that's really what we work with our customers to try to do. And that's it. Thanks everyone for having me. I appreciate it, and looking forward to any questions that you might have.
Okay, Ori, we definitely have some questions coming in. And our first question is, what is your recommendation for heating upgrades replacement in areas where electric systems produce more carbon emissions than other heating fuels?
Well, I would definitely like to dive into that one a little bit more. That's going to probably depend on your current situation. That's a definitely more technical question that my engineering team would probably be very helpful in. So I definitely look to maybe follow up on that and talk a little bit more about it. Sorry, I can't give you a direct answer right now, but I definitely have some follow-up questions for you that would hopefully help identify the actual solution there.
I'll send you the person asking the question. I'll send you their information so you can reach back out.
Thank you.
The next question is, the cash flow suggests a contract duration of 40 years. What ECMs would have a life exceeding 40 years?
So that could really depend on what's going in. Solar isn't quite there. I don't really know of any technology that is 40 years, so that's probably why you're asking that question. The term of the contract can be really driven by a lot of different things. Typically, we're not going to see a term of a contract that's 40 years. It's typically going to be 10 to 15, and usually a maximum of 20 years. And that's more, I guess, for private. Public universities, there's different legislation that allows for public-private partnerships that actually can allow for term contracts up to 50 years. Well, I just had someone point something out to me with that graph because I'm not looking at it right now. That's actually in quarters, so it's not in years. So that would be equivalent to a 10-year. So thank you, someone who pointed that out. I was not aware of that. But that would hopefully answer the question, that it's a 10-year versus a 40-year. But again, the public-private partnership that's available for public universities can exceed up to 50 years. But the technology is typically going to get replaced within that term. So that's usually factored into the actual contract.
Okay, our next question is, what opportunities do you see for energy infrastructure upgrades that colleges and universities need to consider right now?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, when we talk about the infrastructure needs, there's two different goals that we are probably going to look at, and that's our sustainability goals, and then it's our goal to reduce our deferred maintenance. So obviously, the deferred maintenance goal typically takes priority. So there's going to be a lot of energy infrastructure as part of that. And we talk about boilers and we talk about chillers, and it's really things that are necessary to function or for the function of our facilities. But with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of opportunity now to capture some tax credits that could allow, especially in Midwest states that traditionally have lower cost of utilities, so it's much harder to justify a project. Renewable energy and other what used to be really long payback items can become much more. You might have more of an appetite for it now because there's additional benefits. So I think solar and renewable energy, we're seeing a lot of geothermal retrofits at campus-wide. So there's some cool things out there that I think we can definitely incorporate into projects. But at the end of the day, it's really what's going to be compelling, what's going to make the most sense, and what needs to get done now versus 5 years from now.
Okay, our next question is, why should institutions make infrastructure upgrades now instead of waiting for the budget to free up, and how does waiting impact students?
So I think the biggest thing to doing it now is, we talked about the cost of waiting. So if there is a net benefit from a utility saving standpoint, let's capture that now versus allowing that to just kind of go to the wayside and almost thrown away, depending on how you want to look at it, and go to the utility company versus utilizing that and capturing that now to address some of the needs that we have. I think those needs are going to continue to grow as we see deferred maintenance growing. So that's something that's really important to try to stay ahead of that. So we're not, we want to make progress towards getting those things done. And the best way to do that is to start going and start moving forward. So waiting is not going to benefit you, and it's just going to hopefully doesn't, but potentially put you in a deeper hole. And it's tough. It's kind of overwhelming right now. I know a lot of colleges and universities are in that situation where there's those deferred maintenance numbers are just, it's daunting to look at, and it's like, where do we begin? Where do we start?
Okay. Our next question is, why is it important to take a comprehensive approach to energy management instead of tackling projects one at a time?
So this is something we talked about in the presentation today. So obviously, taking a comprehensive approach allows you to look at things together. And this is kind of that example that we talked about with the lighting and the boilers. So you can really apply that example to a lot of different things. You know, we see, I mentioned chiller replacement quite a bit because we do see that as a big need on a lot of college campuses. And chiller is not necessarily something that's going to have this great energy savings component to it. So it's hard to justify from a return on investment standpoint. Likewise with boilers and other large infrastructure like air handlers and rooftop units. By doing a more comprehensive project in looking at these things together, it really allows you to justify a project from an investment standpoint. And then hopefully by using a funding model like sustainable energy as a service, you don't even have to look at it as an investment anymore because there's not actually capital being spent on the project. It's really like, how much can we get done under this type of contract that still provides positive cash flow for us? And then at that point, you're really in a spot like, let's prioritize, let's figure out what the things get done are, and let's go do it and get it done in a year versus 5 years or 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is a 2-point question. What approach does your company take when advising customers how to reach net zero energy, and how does climate factor into that approach?
Yeah, I think, so we talked a little bit about the roadmap and the pathway. So really the biggest thing is the planning component. So we want to work with colleges and universities to help them with their plan and how they're going to approach that. So when I say plan, it's not necessarily the master plan. Typically where we partner with our customers is after the master plan. We come in and we help them. All right, you've got this great plan that you put together, looks good, it should accomplish your goals, but how, what's the actual pathway of implementation and deployment to make sure that we are addressing this? So that's what we want to do is take what you have now and put it in a view where we can see what the best approach is. And there could be multiple approaches, and that's really where we like to work with our college and university partners to identify what's the best approach for you, because it ends up being customized for every single person. So everyone has similar challenges, but everyone's in a different situation. So we want to make sure that the plan and pathway that's laid out is the right one for you and your goals and your priorities. And that's kind of the approach that we would take.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how do we, meaning facilities, keep the savings for facilities?
So that's a good question. That's a great question, actually, because so I did mention that is a procurement challenge, that the savings gets eaten up in the budget. So obviously, if you don't have control of the utility budget as far as the money that's getting paid out of it, and if it's reduced, that money doesn't necessarily go to you. So that's the kind of challenge there. But when you put everything into a comprehensive project that's self-funded with a sustainable energy as a service, the savings is realized as part of that project, and there's a payment commitment from the university. So there's actually, the savings gets used within that project to pay for other things. So for example, again, when we talk about the lighting and boiler project, so that lighting might have $50,000 in savings that results from that project, and that's electrical savings that would just reduce your electrical budget as a university, but you don't actually get to take that $50,000 every year for the next 10 years and spend it on something else. With a SESA approach, that $50,000 would actually be used for a boiler replacement, or 40,000 of the 50,000 would be used for a boiler replacement, and those projects would be done at the same time as part of the same contract. It allows for you to utilize that savings immediately, and then not only the savings from year 1, savings from year 2 through 10. And that's kind of the thought process. Let's capture the savings immediately, the next 10 years of savings immediately, and utilize it now to pay for something else that we need to get done.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is it possible to offer energy as a service to public universities?
Yes. Yeah, so it's definitely becoming more common depending on what part of the country it's in. But it is definitely an offering that we're seeing a lot more interest and a lot more need in the public sector as well because of debt capacity. So obviously, the same thing goes for private and public. There's a certain amount of debt or bonding capacity that you can take on as a university or as a state entity. So we want to help you preserve that bond capacity in the public sector so that bond can be used for new facilities, and the same likewise for private sector. We want to build new facilities so that we can increase enrollment, make our campuses more attractive. So a lot of that debt capacity or bond capacity is reserved for that, those type of projects, and not necessarily able to be used for our energy efficiency projects. So that is absolutely something that can be utilized in public universities to help preserve bond capacity, and it might be an approach that also is helpful because we talked about some of the staffing challenges that you might have with projects, or especially with technologies going in. Put in new technologies like EV chargers and solar and battery storage, you may not have the staff that knows exactly how to maintain that. So as part of a sustainable energy as a service project, that maintenance is not your responsibility or requirement. So that gives you an opportunity to potentially work with a partner like us to help with that ongoing maintenance. And that might not be something that you have to take that risk on yourself, or bring in new staff or training on your existing staff to do that. So a lot of benefits there, but the overall answer is yes, it can be used for public universities.
Okay. Well, that's the end of our questions for today. So at this time, I'd like to say, Ori, thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. And to our attendees, as always, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. So until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Have a great day.